All right. Hi there, everyone. Welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Tom Levine, and I am Cornerstone's technical specialist. Today, we're going to be covering how to use and when to use fillable PDF forms. These are actually pretty useful, and I've made quite a few of them here for the office. If you've ever tried to sign a contract online, chances are you've signed a fillable PDF. So it's a pretty useful thing to know how to fill out and how to use. Especially how to create, at least in insurance, in my opinion. So without further ado, let's get into some housekeeping. First off, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the question box during this presentation. I will probably address it at the moment when it comes up, but if I feel that I, would better benefit from addressing it later, I might do that as well. Don't worry if I don't respond to your questions immediately, I will answer it relatively quickly, or at least at the very end of the presentation. Additionally, if you look a little further down in here and we don't have it up, you should see a handouts section. The handouts are actually pretty useful, and if you'd like to follow along today, feel free to download the sample form that I have. I'm going to be filling that out and converting it to PDF from a DOCX or document format. So if you have Adobe Pro, which is what you'll need to follow along, then please feel free to download that. Also, if you have a question that you don't want to just ask in the middle of the presentation or anything you'd like my more direct input on, please feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is tlevine@crnstone.com, and my phone number is 513-487-5390. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our weekly Monday Minute newsletter for our latest carrier and Cornerstone as well as industry updates. Also, don't forget that you can take advantage as a Cornerstone broker of our ASP services. ASP is our agency services program, and it's designed to help make you a more effective agent, actually. It allows you to pilot your business and have us as your flight crew. You have access to our services, which let you basically take on business that's slightly outside the scope of what you normally do. We create customized plans for you based on your specific needs, and your business and your family are covered. Contact your Cornerstone representative for more information. Also, if you haven't signed up already, feel free to register for our 2023 Cash Incentive Program. Be sure to do so on the Cornerstone website at the link in the slide, which is www.crnstone.com/cash-incentive-program. The exclamation mark is not necessary. And actually, if you enter it, it probably won't take you to the right spot. But feel free to register today. So all that being said, let's get into using fillable PDFs. And I think the best place to start is what even is a PDF? A lot of people use it, but they don't actually know what it is. PDF was a file format created by Adobe in 1993, and it stands for Portable Document Format. Adobe is now an ISO, which is an International Standard Development Organization, in order to keep all the third-party systems that use PDF kind of on the same track as far as what the file extension does, how to code it, and please excuse the nerd talk for the next bit. But the main thing that makes PDF kind of useful is that it's intended to be a finalized document format that can't be fully edited. It stores typeset text as content streams and not plain text. And what that means is that it doesn't store it as strings of binary code. A content stream is just like a string of ones and zeros, while most plain text is stored as readable material, which makes it harder for computers to interpret text displayed. For instance, in plain text, your computer sees the letter H as the letter H. It doesn't know the shape of the letter. It doesn't know what any of that means. It just knows this glyph or this little icon is the letter H. But in a content stream, it doesn't see the letter H. It just sees some pixels on the screen that are in a certain orientation, which happen to take on the shape of the letter H. So in PDF, it doesn't actually know what's typed. It just kind of considers it an image. At least that's kind of a good way to think of it. Whereas in plain text, which is something like what Word uses, then it'll actually see what you're typing and have those logged as ASCII characters. The big takeaway from it, though, is in PDF, the words are not really words, they're pictures. And in a document editor like Word, they're actually words as far as your computer is concerned. So that being said, that makes Adobe pretty useful for finalized legal document formats, as well as forms that you don't want people to edit, because it's a lot harder to edit a PDF than it would be to edit a Word document. So that being said, what is a fillable PDF? Well, a fillable PDF allows for PDFs to be edited and kind of interacted with by the end user. It is a PDF with boxes and areas for you as the user to fill in. Fillable fields are things like text fields, check marks, radio buttons, which are those little push buttons that you can see, list boxes, which are just boxes of lists, drop downs, which let the user pick from like a drop down value. I think most of us probably used those. Buttons, which just let you hit a button and open a file or do something else, take an action. A lot of forms use these buttons to kind of submit forms to websites. So when you're done, you just hit a submit button and it goes off to the form processor. It also lets you use signature fields, which lets people digitally sign forms, or barcodes, which is a separate option, and we're not really going to be fully covering barcodes in this presentation. It does normally require a separate subscription aside from an Adobe subscription, and honestly, I don't think they're excessively useful unless you're working in like an industry or maybe like something like a grocery store where you have to constantly edit document labels or different labels for different sorts of packaging. It's not completely applicable to insurance, so we're not going to get too deep into it. That being said, what programs can you use for PDF? And there's actually a wide variety. As far as form creation, there's really only one that's pretty much the standard, which is Adobe Acrobat Pro. There is another one that was kind of created for Macs, but Adobe now makes Mac software, so I wouldn't recommend using it, called PDF Pen Pro. I honestly have never used it, and I've heard it's simple, but when in doubt, always go with Adobe. Because it's their proprietary software, it's always better to just use them versus any other document or any other type of program that says it can edit it. That being said, you can pretty much fill out any PDF and open any PDF with a web browser, that or Adobe Reader. I personally wouldn't pay for an Adobe Reader license. All it does is let you read documents. It doesn't really let you edit them that much. I would normally just open up any PDF document I'm working with either Adobe Pro, because I have the editing software, or with any web browser. Particularly any Chrome-based browser is probably the best. Google Chrome is pretty good, and I actually really like using Microsoft Edge for editing PDFs, well, as far as filling out PDF forms. So no need to pay for Adobe Reader Pro. And the reason I say that is because this software can get a little expensive. For an individual annual subscription, there's a $19.99 per month option or a $239.88 annual prepaid option. Now, that is different from the individual month-to-month subscription, and there is some confusion on this, so I'm going to explain it in a bit more detail. The individual annual subscription locks you in for a full year. So if you go to Adobe and say, hey, I'm going to use this software all year, but I'll pay you month to month, they'll make you pay $19.99 a month or just the full fee for the full year. And $19.99 a month adds up to that $239.88 value. If, however, you decide, you know what, I need some flexibility, maybe I'm only going to edit this form for a month, solidify it, get it done, I don't want to pay any more than that, that's an option as well. The difference is it's $29.99 a month, so $10 more, which adds up to $359.88 per year. Additionally, if you're going to work with a large team and you want all of them to have the ability to create forms like this or edit forms like this, then you're going to need a better license. That's probably going to be a business license, which lets you get up to 50 users with a minimum of 5 contracts. These licenses are what you need to actually activate the software. You can download Adobe Pro to any computer, but to actually use it, you're going to need a software license, and that's what costs money. It's $22.19 per month, or it's $266.26 per year under this license plan that they have. If you have more than 50 subscribers, however, you're going to have to actually contact them directly at the Pro Enterprise number. And real quick, I'm going to put these numbers in chat. That would be 800-915 9430 for their enterprise. Or if you're trying to access Adobe Pro directly, I'm going to put a link here in a moment. That being said, for today's walkthrough, we're going to be using Adobe Acrobat X Pro. It's an older version of Pro. It's out of active support, but Pro basically works the exact same way as this version of the software, so you shouldn't run into any real trouble with it. Additionally, it should be exactly the same way that Pro works, more or less. You might just have to find things in slightly different menu option. But all of the fields should be pretty much the same, and it'll be useful to help you understand your options while doing things like this. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is my copy of the sample form, and I'm going to be using this to show you exactly what we need to do to actually create this document. If you haven't already, go ahead and download that from handouts if you're going to follow along. But as you can see here, it's a Word document, not a PDF. And that's purposeful. We're going to actually convert this into PDF, and you can do it even without Adobe software. If you run Windows 10 or Windows 11 or any recent version of Windows, actually, you should have the option to do something called print to PDF. And that's one of the ways you can convert documents into a PDF to make this form. Another way is to actually just directly convert it into a finalized PDF. If you have the option, that's what I'd pick. Doing a print to PDF option works, and it works well, but I find that you have a better resolution of the document if you just convert it directly. So that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to walk you through both options. Before we do, though, I just want to scroll through this form a little bit. We're going to put pretty much every single one of those form options on this that I said we could do in PDF, and then I'm going to show you how to fill it out. As you can see, we have a name box that I've kind of added right here. We have a date field, and we have some options right here. We're going to put check marks next to these, as well as some radio buttons down here. And finally, we're going to have a longer fillable format document here. We're going to have a list down here. And then we're going to have a button that links to Cornerstone's website, as well as a signature field and a additional text box. And that'll be really interesting. I'll show you why here in a second. But let's go ahead and convert this to PDF. The way that you do that is first by going to File. And if you're working in an older version of Windows and don't have direct access to this, convert direct to PDF option, then what you're going to want to do is go to Print. Now, when you hit Print, you're going to go to this printer drop down here, and you're going to choose Print to PDF. When you do, it'll set up your printer options, and when we hit Print, it will actually open up a Save icon right here, and that lets you save this file. We're going to go ahead and save it to my desktop, and we're going to save this as sample print. I'm going to hit Save. Now that I have that, I'm going to open up the PDF document. And I just did that by double clicking. As you can see, it's got our form here, but it has these kind of little lines right in here that kind of separate things. And while it looks pretty sharp, this is a pretty basic document, so you're not going to see much of the difference. But I just want to convert it the other way real quick to show you the difference in look. Now I'm going to go to File, and instead of Print, I'm going to hit Export. Export lets you export a document directly to PDF, and it'll open up this saving window right here. We're going to go to the desktop as well, and instead of sample print, we're going to save this as sample export and hit Publish. Now that I have this up over here, as you can see, it doesn't really look that different, but I assure you a lot of the difference is really going to be technical. It's not going to be necessarily look per se. If you're using an older version of Word, it might affect things more, or if you're using pictures in your document, that also might affect things more. Either way, you have both options at your disposal. Personally, I prefer to do the direct conversion. I think it encodes things better. But like I said, if you don't have that option, you can always print to PDF. Now, that being said, I'm going to close out of my Word document, and we're going to edit this further. Like I said, this is going to be in Adobe Acrobat X, which is the software that we use here. If you have your own document and you're following along and you're using Pro, it might be slightly different. For now, I just want to kind of walk you through this upper section up here. Now, in Acrobat, you have the option to highlight text and add comments directly. But if I click here and just start typing, if you couldn't hear that, I was typing, nothing happens. And that's because we have to actually add forms for you to fill out to this sheet. Just leaving it like this won't help. On the left-hand side, you can kind of scroll page by page, which is something you'll want to do in multiple page forms as well. As you can see, it also kind of shows you where you are in your document as well. So that's just getting familiar with the menu. But that said, the most important part of forms is going to be under Tools. If I click on Tools, I have a few different sections here. Pages let you edit the way pages are ordered, change a background, add in watermarks, things of that nature, as well as extracting pages and copying or replacing pages in your PDF. There's also Content, which lets you attach a file, add an interactive button without adding in a form editor, which pretty much is exactly the same way as the form editor, so I'm not going to cover that part of this section, as well as adding in links. So you can add in kind of interactable elements from this section, but not a lot. We're going to skip over forms because that's what we're going to cover last and go to recognize text. What this does is it lets you actually kind of see what text is in the file. It converts things from that, stream that I was talking about earlier of ones and zeros into actual readable text. This is useful if you're going to copy and paste excerpts from this document into an email, or if you're going to do kind of more advanced things like take things out of PDF and back into Word. It doesn't really work that well for conversion, but it is useful if you're trying to get specific sections of text that you're trying to show and share. You can also encrypt documents under the protection section, and you can sign and certify your document from this bottom section here. You can also double click on the sign field that we're going to be adding here in just a second as well. That being said, the most important section of this is going to be forms. If I click on the drop-down under Forms, I get to hit Create, and that opens up this little dialog box window. First, it asks you what source you're going to want to use. So you don't have to necessarily open the document before you actually do this. You can just open your program itself, hit Create, and it'll ask you where the form's coming from. You can use the current document or browse for a file if you had nothing else open. And you can also just scan in a paper form to convert it directly this way. We're going to use the current document, however. Next, it'll ask to locate the document to convert. I can import a file, which, as I said, you can do directly. It'll just open up a normal window to let you search your computer, and you can find files that way. Or we can use the current document, which is what I'm going to do as well. And what it does immediately upon converting it into a fillable form is it actually creates a lot of these little boxes. As you can see, it has quite a few filled out here, and we're actually going to be deleting most of them. What this is all of these are text boxes, and it uses kind of underlines, anything that kind of has a line there, to kind of fill fields as much as it can. This is pretty useful in most cases because a lot of the times in documents, you just want a fillable field for people to just kind of type whatever they need into your document. But in this case, that's not exactly what's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this section. I did that by just clicking and dragging over it and hitting the delete key on my keyboard. What that does is it deletes the box that it had already picked up. I'm also going to delete the one here. And then I'm also going to delete this box here. And I'm also going to delete this sample form section, but you don't have to. What it is it's just a text box. It picks up the text that it thinks it's going to be called and fills it in here. What I would recommend doing if you're following along is right-clicking and hitting Properties on this section, but instead I'm going to go ahead and delete it and just add a new field. What I'm going to be adding in first is a text field. And the reason that I was saying that you just want to kind of leave it there is because that's already what it was. As you can see, it kind of has this blue section here on the bottom right-hand quadrant of these little crosshairs. I'm not sure if you have the resolution to see those, but these crosshairs kind of let you figure out where you're placing the box and what size it's going to be. Always drag to the upper left-hand side of the corner where you want to start placing your fillable field, then left-click and drag to kind of highlight the area you're going to insert your field. Then just let go of your mouse and it'll insert the text box. You can change the field name here, and I'm going to change this to company name because that's the field that this is. I'm also going to hit the check mark to make it required and then go to all properties. You don't have to do that on every single field, but by making a field required, it will give your user notice and to kind of highlight that box in red to show that in order to actually submit the form and have it processed, they absolutely have to have that field filled out on the form. We use this for our field here when we used our, I believe it's the ACH registration form, which I made. That actually lets people know, hey, you have to add this information to the form to even get this processed. And it's actually pretty useful. I use it all the time in forms because a lot of times people will kind of skip things they actually need to fill in that aren't optional. So I like to mark it as required if it's necessary. We can also, and I'm going to walk through some of these menu options as well, make the form required directly from the properties menu, and we can change the name from right up here. Tooltip is what will pop up if you hover your mouse over the field once it's finalized. And we're going to type in this tooltip, input your company name. Then we're going to go to appearance. And appearance is actually one of the things you'll want to address immediately when you create a box that has fillable text. What that does is it lets you change the way the box appears, as well as change the font size and font listed. I'm going to use Times Roman because I think that just has a little bit of a better view to it. And I'm going to make it font size 11. Now, it's not available from the dropdown, but if you just click on font size and hit backspace, then you can just type in whatever font you want. We're going to use font size 11, like I said. You can also edit the text color. So if you wanted them to fill in the color here is a little bit more gray, you can click on it and select from one of these gray options, or hit other color and get a more accurate adjustment for whatever color you want. We're going to leave it black this time though. Also, if you click on border color, let's go ahead and make this border red because it's a required field. And then we're going to make it medium thickness. You can also fill in the interior of this area, but we're not going to do that this time with color down there. And we're going to actually go ahead and make this a dashed border line as well. Next, we're going to go to options. We want this text aligned left currently, so we're going to leave that there. But you can also align text entered into a field right or center. You'll also be able to allow multi-line scrolling, which we're going to do here in a second. But that means that if you have a very large text box, it'll let it kind of scroll down through the text as you're adding form information. And you can also allow for rich text formatting. That's actually an interesting option because what it does is it lets the text that you're entering in here actually be readable once the form is filled out. As far as other document editors go, Word can pretty much use the basic data entry information that's typed in, but rich text formatting allows it to kind of convert that a little bit easier. So if you want the form to be, exported a little easier, you can check that box. You can also limit the number of characters that people can type in by enabling this option here. Limit of X characters, in this case 10, where that number there is how many characters they can enter into that box. You can also add a spell checker if you want, just by clicking that option. You can also enable passwords and other file selections down here, but honestly, I don't use those very often, and it's not very often that you probably will want to take advantage of those sections either. Next is actions, and we'll be covering that more when we actually get into push buttons. So I'm going to kind of move on from that. Then we have formats, and that actually formats the type of information you're entering into a box. We're going to leave this as no format right now because this is just text, but in the next box we're going to add, which is date, we're going to go to formats to actually format it as a date. Then you can add form validation here as well, which is kind of a scripted thing. A lot of times you're not going to want to take advantage of this, but what it does is it lets you kind of validate what's actually entered into that info. And finally, if you're going to use a set of fields that are going to do math, you can add a calculation here for manual entry. I think this pretty much takes care of entering a company name, so I'm going to hit close and click off of that field. As you can see, because we added that red border, it's very thick around that field. And what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to select the box and hit Control-C to copy. You can also right-click and hit copy as well. Then I'm going to scroll down on the form, and I'm going to hit Control-V. Now, this is when I want to show you this area over here to the right. What this does is it kind of shows you how many fields are named the same and how those are kind of aligned. As you can see, when I hit paste, it created a field called company name #1. What that means is that these two fields are linked. Whatever I fill into this top company name will automatically copy and fill out in this lower company name, which means that the person filling out this form only has to enter their company name once, and it'll fill that in multiple spots throughout the sheet as I go through. That's very useful in other documents, like if you're signing a contract or writing up a kind of agreement to do business with someone. If you want their company name to be replicated in multiple parts, then you can go ahead and just copy and paste those fields through. The next one we're going to add is going to be another text field, and it's going to be right about here. So I'm going to drag and drop and create that field. We're going to call this date, and we're not going to make this one required. We're going to go to Properties, Format, and then we're going to select Date. What this does is it lets us select through a bunch of different date formatting options for how things are displayed. The one that I like and the one that's most clean is M-D-YYYY. But what it'll do is it'll take any text that's entered into this box and convert it into this format. For example, that's 5-9-2023 for today's date. If I were to select one of these other options, like MMDDYYY or YY, then it's just 2-month characters, 2-day characters, and 2-year characters. So that's 05-09-2023. Or MMDDYYYY, which is fully spelled out month, day, year, 2 months characters, 2-day characters, and 4-year characters, or MM-YY, and so on and so forth. All of these formats are pretty self-explanatory as long as you know M is month, D is day, and Y is year. The only thing I will mention though is if you use this one right here, like M-D-YYYY, which is the one I use, and you enter like 10 or 11 or 12 for month, it will actually enter that full day in. So it doesn't like limit it to one character. It's more like if it has the option to use one character instead of 2, it will. For instance, instead of 5-9-2023, if I select this one down here, it'll do 05-09-23. So it just removes that 0 when necessary. Now that I have that selected, I'm going to go back to General, make sure the form is visible, and close it. Orientation, which actually I probably should mention here, also angles text. So like if I oriented this 90 degrees and entered typeface, it would format the text horizontally, or vertically, sorry. So make sure that your degrees are set at 0. You normally don't have to do that. It's normally automatic, but just something I'd want to let you know. If you're doing graphic design and you're like adding in a watermark, you might use that to tilt it at a 45-degree angle and just type like draft or something. Next, we're going to add in checkboxes. And we do that by going to this Add New Field section under Tasks, upper right, and selecting Checkbox. The reason I'm using checkboxes here is because I don't want to limit this selection of this section to just one option. Now, when I put it in, see how it entered checkbox number 3? We're going to go ahead and remove that and hit Enter. Now, Enter does nothing here. I just clicked off. It's just kind of something I'm normally used to. If you, like me, however, made this checkbox a little big and wanted to resize it, you just click on the box and drag it a little smaller and then realign it. You can also double click like I just did to open up properties on the box. We're gonna kind of make this a little bit better sized. There we go. Now I'm gonna select it, hit Control Copy, and then Control V. As you can see, it's doing that replicating thing that I was talking about earlier. It now has checkbox 0 and checkbox 1. And I'm going to copy it one more time, hit paste, and then align this third one as well. Now, if I left it this way, if you checked one of these boxes, it would check all of these boxes, which isn't that great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename them. All I'm going to do is right-click on a box, hit Rename Field, and now I get to rename it. I'm going to type this and fill it out as want to. The next one is going to be decided. And the final one is going to be presenter. And what that does is it removes that link that I was talking about earlier. Now, if we check one of these boxes, it won't necessarily check all of them because they're not linked. It's the same kind of way as filling in your company name up here, fills in the company name down here. As long as you don't see that hashtag next to things, you can know they're not linked and they're not going to automatically fill out other fields. The next thing we're going to show you is radio buttons. And what those do is it lets people select very specifically one fill-in dot option from a form. I'm going to go ahead and click Add New Field, Radio button, and go ahead and add one in here. We're going to start up here, fill it out to there, and we now have a radio button for sole proprietorships. Like I did before with checkboxes, I'm just going to copy and paste these to make sure they're the same size, drag them into place, and then rename them. Once you have one copied, you don't have to actually recopy them. So we're just going to try to line those up best we can next to these boxes before we go ahead and start renaming things. Then we're going to rename this sole proprietor, C Corp, S Corp, partnership, trust, and finally, LLC. And that kind of does it for each of our radio buttons. Now, each of these are no longer linked. And as you can see that based on here, it all has single click option. The way around that is just to leave them named the same. And as I've entered all of these, I've realized I probably should have. We only want people to be able to select one of these options down here. And by renaming each of these, it actually kind of mucked things up. It made sure that people can select multiple options. I did that on purpose, actually. And the reason I did that is to kind of show you that if you hit Control Z, which is undo, it'll still work for all of these. If you look over on the right-hand side by fields, all of these are now linked as choice 1, which means if I click on one of these, all of them will be grouped under the same choice. Now, radio buttons work a little bit differently than other options. Because they're all grouped under the same choice, it'll mean you can only select one instead of automatically checking multiple. Next, we're going to add in a dropdown. So I'm going to go to Add New Field, select Dropdown, and add this dropdown here. There are a few different types of LLCs, so if someone selects this option, I want them to be able to choose from a list. We're going to type this in and name it LLC Opt, and go to All Properties. If I then go to Options, it'll let us add options to this dropdown. We're going to go ahead and add C Corp, S Corp, and Partnership. And the way I'm doing that is just typing C Corp and hit Add. Then I'm going to do S Corp, hit Add again, and finally E Partnership. And then I'm going to close it. What this does is it lets people select these options from the drop-down. Actually, we should probably go back into properties and change the appearance of this as well. Currently, it's set to Helvetica size 12. We're going to make this Times New Roman, and we're going to make it size, let's say, 7 font. And hit close. That way, it should be a little bit easier for people to read and see. The next thing we're going to add is if they have anything additional to say. This option will let people kind of fill out whatever they want to throughout this series of text boxes. We're going to go to Add New and hit Text Field. And then we're going to click and kind of select the entire area of text field right here. And we're going to let go. We're going to call this Additional Info. And then we're going to go to Properties. Now, if I left it this way and just let the user start typing, it wouldn't normally kind of just fill out the way that normally you would expect it to, which is kind of it loops around and only fills in info on those lines. In order to enable that, we need to go to Options and check multi-line right here. What that does is it lets the text box kind of scroll through and add information. We're also going to go back to Appearance, make sure it's font size 11, and change the font to Times New Roman. And that'll mean that as people type into that box, it kind of fills out naturally. Next, we have this field here. Anyone you think any of these entities could benefit from this webinar? That was a typo on my end, but it probably should say, do you think any of these entities could benefit from this webinar? And the reason we're using that is because it allows you to put in a list box. List boxes are very similar to drop-downs, except instead of having just a drop-down where you can view things, it lets you just kind of see a list of options outright. We're going to go ahead and type into this box, list, is what I'm going to call it. Then I'm going to go to All Properties, Options. And you add information in here the exact same way you would for a text box. I'm going to add Corp, Agent, Other, Different. What really matters here is just that we have a bunch of different options. It can be whatever you'd like. I'm going to say Dealer's Choice as well, and hit Add. Now, it can also sort items if you click this option down here. As you can see, it organized it alphabetically. And you can also let people choose multiple options, which is something you can't really do with a drop-down. So that's why you would use lists over other options, like a drop-down. And then we're going to hit Close. Now we're going to add only 2 other fields to this form. The first is a link to the Cornerstone webpage. And lastly, we're going to add a signature box. Now, signature boxes are actually really, really useful. And what they do is they let you pretty much just add a signature to any document. It's very useful because you kind of need to sign any contract that you're going to submit. Also, buttons let you normally submit forms. In this case, we're going to add a link to the Cornerstone website, but if you wanted to like sign and complete a document, you could sign it and then hit the button for submit using these options. We're going to add new field and hit button and go ahead and add in the button first. And we're going to add it right about here, let's say. And I'm going to title this to CRN website. And go to all properties. Now, one interesting thing about buttons like this is the name is just the name of the button. It doesn't actually fill in any text. If we go to appearance, I can change the font size and type of the text here. We're going to do our normal 11 Times New Roman. Then I'm going to go to options and fill in this label. This label is going to be to web. And I'm going to say it is a label only. And lastly, we have actions. Now, there are a whole bunch of different triggers here, and they're all pretty specific and pretty useful. What I'm going to do is select mouse enter, and what that does is it makes it so whenever you click on the button, it will do something. Then we're going to go to open a web link and hit add. It will open up this dialog box right here that says edit URL. We're going to type in http:// that's just the input for any basic website, so it's just where your web address starts. Then we're going to go to www.crnstone.com. You probably don't need the http:// part, but I like to include it just because it's part of a good full URL. It'll take a little bit less time to open that way. Then I'm going to hit OK, and then hit close. And that will have a button right here that says to web, and if you click it, it'll open the Cornerstone website. The last thing we're going to add here is going to be a signature box. As you can see right here, it says digital signature. And we're just going to have it right about here. We're going to name this field signature and make it required because you have to fill it out in order to submit this document. Then I'm going to go to all properties, appearance, and make sure that the appearance of this box is correct. We're going to do Times New Roman because that's what everything else is so far. We're also going to have no color on this border and make it just general. So we're good, and hit close. So not painful at all, really. Now we have everything that we actually need created for this form. So we're going to save and close. What I'm going to do is hit this save icon right here to just save it to where it is right now. I'm going to save it as sample export and replace the existing file. Then I'm going to hit close form editing. And now we have our form ready to be filled out. As you can see, I have all these radio buttons working. I have different checkboxes that I can select, and I can even fill in company names if I need to. And this form is now complete. If I wanted to select like multiple options from here, I just have to hold down Control and click on all of the ones I want selected. And now it has all of these selected. If I just want one, I click on one. If I wanted to say add a different option down here or select one, I can change the different LLC type. If I just start typing, I'm going to hold down the D button so you can see how it kind of loops through. We have our text just regularly rotating. You can adjust the different size of the text to kind of fit the box that it's filling. For instance, we could up the font size on here, and it would probably fill this box a little bit better. And then we're going to add a date. Let's use today's date. We're going to, that would be May 9, click off the box, and it automatically formats it into our correct format. And then we're going to put in a company name. Let's go ahead and do Cornerstone. If I then click off of that box and scroll down, as you can see, the Cornerstone box here auto-filled as well. To show that this button right here works as well, I'm going to click on it. And it should, if I hit allow from this pop-up, open up a web browser. Now, I actually made a mistake here by adding that HTTP. So in order to fix that, we're just going to go back into Forms and hit Edit. If I right-click here and go to Properties and go to Options, or Actions, my apologies, I'm going to change it here from mouse enter, and I'm going to hit delete on that. We're going to use mouse up because when I was scrolling over it, it wasn't quite working. And because of the HTTP, it didn't like to do that. We're going to make this link just www.cornerstone.com. Hit OK, and now it should open up properly. I'm just going to hit close form editing, save it again, and now when I click on the link, it should open up cornerstone.com in my web browser, which it did. Now the last part of these forms is signing them, and all you have to do to actually sign is click on a signature field. It'll give you an option for existing digital IDs. If you have one like a signature file, you can do that by clicking My Existing Digital ID here and hitting Next. Or if you want to create one, which is what I'd recommend doing for PDFs, I'm going to click a new digital ID I want to create now and hit Next. It'll then ask you where you want to store your self-signed digital ID. New PKCS-12 digital ID file is going to be right up here. And what that does is that just kind of creates a new file type that gets added on. You can also use a Windows certificate, but PKCS-12 or #12 is what I'm going to use just by default. Hit Next, and then you just fill in your information. For instance, for this one, we're going to do sample webinar, organization CRN, and you can fill out whatever you want here. For email address, we're going to use actually the email address for me, which is Levine Thomas, or no, it is Levine. That's crnstone.com. Hit Next, and then we can add a password here. I'm going to drag it off screen to enter this, but I'm going to type in a password and then hit Finish. And what that does is it creates a digital signature that I can sign. We're going to sign it, and I have to actually enter that password I had. So we're going to enter it off screen and then hit Sign. Then it'll ask you to export the document, and we're going to export it as sample export signed. Hit Save. And now we have this signature that is signed. If you or the person you're sending this document to then clicks on it, it'll give you a little legal notice and say that the signature is valid. And that is pretty much how you use these fillable forms. You can also fill this out, and I'm going to go ahead and close it, over another different type of file system or a different program. We're going to actually open that same fillable PDF now that we've got it filled out in, let's go ahead and do it in Microsoft Edge. So what I'd want to do is I'm just going to, oh, I'm sorry, that is the wrong file. That's the printed one. Go to the sample export, right click, and hit Open with Microsoft Edge. And as you can see, it's loading in this document. Now, this version is not signed, so I can go ahead and edit this. We're going to call this CRN. If I click off, it keeps all the autofill. I can change the check marks here and update information and just use whatever browser or whatever form filling tool I would like. And I think that about covers it for today. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and put up my contact information as well. Once again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to enter them now. Thank you so much for attending Tech Tuesday, and I hope you learned something and have a great day. Thank you.